we are going to discuss regarding the limitations of ecological pyramids. In the previous sessions, we studied about different types of ecological pyramids, and also this ecological pyramids shows some of the limitations. Let us see one by one. The ecological pyramids does not take into account of some species which belongs to two or more trophic levels, and those species are not considered or they are not placed in a trophic level of in the pyramids. It assumes a simple food chain, something that almost never exists in nature. The ecological pyramids does not accommodate the food web because it's depending on the simple food chain. Decomposers are not given any place in the ecological pyramids, even though they play a vital role in the ecosystem. They are not kept or they are not placed, that is, the decomposers are not placed in any of the trophic levels in the ecological pyramids. And next we shall see about ecological succession. The ecological succession is also called as biotic succession. Let me see what it is. It is the ecological succession is the natural development of series of biotic communities. Natural development of series, that means continuous series of biotic communities over a long period of time, one after the another, in the same area to establish a stable community, and that is called as ecological succession. I would like to repeat what is ecological succession. Ecological succession or the biotic succession is nothing but the natural development. It is not man-made. It is happening or it is taking place in the environment naturally. It is a natural development or a series of biotic communities over a long period of time, one after the another, in the same area to establish a stable community is called as ecological succession. Later on, after taking the examples, will come a very clear picture regarding ecological succession. Or we can also define the ecological succession as the gradual and fairly predictable change in the species composition. In the species composition of a given area is called as ecological succession. Ecological succession can also be defined as the gradual, that means slowly, one by one, the gradual and fairly predictable changes in the species composition in a given geographical area is called as ecological succession. The entire sequence, the entire process or the entire sequence of communities that successively change in a given area is called as series. In the next, we shall see several changes, that means those series of changes or sequential changes what we observed in the ecosystem, that is the several changes that occurs in the several stages. We have listed one by one. The individuals transitional communities, the individual transitional communities are termed as several stages or several communities. That means individual transitional communities. Community means there will be a group of plants or there will be a group of animals, what we can consider a group of organisms which are there, and those are showing the transitional changes, or they are termed as several stages or several communities. In the successive several stages, there is an increase in the number and total biomass. When we have taken an geographical area, there a group of community or group of organisms are showing transitional changes, or they are showing successive several stages. There is an increase in their number. When their number is increased, and there is also increase in their biomass, and that we also consider as the successive several stages. Change in the diversity of species of organisms also can be considered as the changes that we see in the several stages. Next, effects of natural and human induced disturbances on the ecological succession. In this changes or in this series of changes which is taking place in an environment to frame an ecosystem, what happens? There is disturbance caused by the humans. Let me see one by one. It may be human or the natural or the human induced disturbances. The disturbances are not only done by the humans, some natural accumulatives also will lead to the effects to the ecosystem or the ecological succession. Fire and deforestation. Forest fire also will affect the ecological succession. Deforestation, that means cutting off trees and destroying the forest, also affects very largely the ecological succession. That can convert a particular several stages of succession into an early stages, and also can create new condition that encourage some of the species and discourage or eliminate some other species. This natural or the human disturbances may also lead or it may encourage for the development of some species, but sometimes these disturbances or interferences leads to discourage or elimination of many other species. And next we shall see the types of ecological succession. We discussed what is ecological succession, and now we are going to discuss about the different types of ecological succession. There are two different types of ecological succession, such as the first one is primary succession, and the second type of ecological succession is secondary succession. Let me say what is primary succession. The primary succession occurs on the bare rocks, cold lava and newly created ponds and newly created lakes. There the primary succession or the primary series of changes takes places on the bare rocks, cold lava, newly created ponds and newly created lakes, where the environment is favorable. Where there is primary succession, the environment will be favorable to establish a stable community. Where the favorable environment is there we can find the stable or we can see the stable community, and hence it is very challenging, it is slow and takes about thousands of years to establish the stable community. The primary succession is not a very rapid or a very fast process. Instead, the primary succession is a very longer period and it takes thousands of years to construct a stable community. And this is how the primary succession is formed. And under primary, next to the primary succession, we can see the second type of succession, that is secondary succession. The secondary succession occurs in the area where the biotic communities are already existed and in the area which is destroyed by birth, floods and deforestation has taken place. Here the environment is favorable and not challenging to establish a stable community, and it is faster compared to the primary succession. In primary succession, what happened? There was no community, that means there was no organisms. That is the succession or the series of natural process that took place on rocks and cooled lava and a very newly formed ponds and lakes. There, to form a natural newly formed community, what happened? It took several thousands of years to frame a stable community or a stable ecosystem. But in secondary succession, what is happening? This is taking place or it's occurring where the biotic communities are already existed. That means where already a formed pond ecosystem is there, or where there is ocean or sea or river like this, where the biotic communities are already existed, which was formed before itself. There the secondary succession takes place. And also in which other areas? One is where there is biotic communities, and again where we can see the secondary succession that can be observed in destroyed or burned floods and deforestation. That means some volcanoes will take places in the environment or in some ecosystem. When the volcanoes are flowed, that complete area will be burned, and after hundreds of years that will be cooled, and that burnt area again what happens, the series of changes takes places. That means again the ecosystem is framed. We can consider it as a secondary secondary succession. And also where we can see where the floods has taken place. Once upon a time there were animals, there were plants, there were many other organisms, but due to natural destruction, that is flood, everything was washed and everything was dead, but their organic matter was remained in that community or in that region. In that particular area, again the succession may take place, again the life may form, and that can also be considered as the secondary succession. And in the region of deforestation, deforestation is nothing but cutting off trees and destroying the forest. So before there was forest, it was destroyed due to various activities. If the forest is destroyed, definitely the organisms or the animals which were living in those forests will be completely destroyed. But still later, after several years, the region where the deforestation was taken place, even in that region the life forms will get start or be due to various series of changes, and that is also can be considered as a secondary succession. Like this, the secondary succession will occur in the area where biotic communities were already before itself which were existed, and it will also occur in the areas which is destroyed by burn or floods and deforestation. Here the environment is favorable because the organic substances or organic materials will be exist or present already, and it is not so challenging to establish a new stable community, and it is faster, very faster compared to the primary succession. The plants grown in a new area and in which the bare area are called as pioneer species. I'll repeat, the plants grown in a new area and in which the bare area, which is grown in a new area and it is invading the bare rocks or bare areas, are called as pioneer species. The plant succession starts in aquatic habitat, it may be ponds, lake, ocean, seas, etc. That condition is called as hydrocere or hydrarch. Repeating, the plant succession starts in the aquatic habitat. That condition is called as hydrocere or hydrarch because water is considered as hydra. That means hydrocere or hydrarch. Hydrarch succession means the succession which is occurring or taking place in the aquatic medium. Hydrarch means hydrarch succession takes places in wet area and succession series progresses from hydric to mesic condition. Now we know what is hydric condition, but what about the mesic condition? That means mesic condition means that the region or area will be wet or in a moderate temperature or a moderate climatic condition will be maintained, and hence this hydric succession takes place even though in the aquatic media, and that succession series progresses. That means the changes continues from hydrarch to the mesic condition to the moderate, from aquatic to the moderate condition. We call it as mesic condition. Next, we shall see the primary succession in water. That is the primary series of changes that is taking place in water. Let me see what happens here. The pioneers are the small phytoplanktons. The pioneers are the small phytoplanktons. Why we are considering phytoplanktons as pioneers? Because they are present in the water. We have taken the primary succession we are seeing in the water. So the pioneers are the phytoplanktons, very small phytoplanktons. They are replaced by free floating or submerged free floating angiosperms, then rooted hydrophytes, sedges, grasses, and finally the trees. This is how the gradual changes took place or taking place. That means the pioneer or the initial beginners are the pioneers. These pioneers are small phytoplanktons. They are the small, very small aquatic plants which are present in the aquatic ecosystem. They are replaced by free floating angiosperms, then the rooted hydrophytes, grasses, and finally the trees. The climax would be the forest because we started from the small phytoplanktons and it leads to the floating angiosperms. and it leads to the hydrophytes, grasses, and finally the trees, and then in the climax it would be the forest, and then the water body is converted into land. Next, we shall see the primary succession, that how took place in water. First, we saw the phytoplanktons. This is the nothing but the water body. Initially, what we are seeing, the first A picture, what we are seeing is the water body is present, and there the pioneer community is the phytoplanktons. We said phytoplanktons are the very small aquatic plants which are submerged in stage. They are submerged plants in the water body. Next, these phytoplanktons, they are transformed or developed into submerged floating stages. That is, submerged free floating plants in the water body. What we are seeing in the third picture, that is the submerged floating plants we are observing. These submerged, from the submerged free floating stage, completely the plants are free floating in the water medium or in the water ecosystem, and these free floating plants, again they are proceeded to form a swamp reed. Here what we are seeing in the picture D, that is the swamp reed stage of plants, and they are developed and they are leading to meadow, that is marsh stages. That means they are in a very large population. They have developed and grown well compared to the previous stage, and that leads to next they are developed into trees, and this leads to the climax community. That means then gradually from tree to it is converted into a huge forest. This is how the climax community is formed.